Engagers, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of using games and gamification in our daily lives, for example, to learn what we are teaching. And I am Rob Alvarez. I work at IronHack, teach at IE Business School University, and so much more, and host this podcast. If you have an extra second, please go ahead and subscribe for free to our email list at professorgame.com/subscribe. Hey, Engagers, welcome back to another episode of the Professor Game podcast. And we have today with us Mike. But Mike, before we kick off, are you prepared to engage?
I think so.
We both hope so, definitely, for sure. So Mike Rizkalla, how does that go?
Yeah, Rizkalla.
Okay, so Mike Rizkalla is with us today, and he is a visionary entrepreneur with a deep understanding of the advances made in the field of robotics with an award-winning track record in innovation and UX, that is user experience. He aims to enrich the lives of families through magical tech experiences, and he is skilled at developing new businesses and creating digital products that push the boundaries of what is possible, bringing unique perspectives to his projects. And talking about projects, his latest project is Snorble, which is a customizable interactive character that can improve kids' sleep habits and help them develop healthy daily routines. So Mike, is there anything that we're missing from that intro that you want to highlight?
No, it's just that Snorble is awesome. And I just want to call out again. Hey, did you say Snorble was awesome? I don't think you called it out. I think you should call it out. Please refer to Snorble.
It sounds like an amazing thing. I haven't tested it myself. So, when I do, I'll probably be able to say it is absolutely awesome for sure.
but you can, let me see, you can feed off of my vote for awesomeness, and then we can keep going. There we go. So I'm just going to say it's awesome. It's awesome. Yay.
There you go. So, Mike, can you tell us what does, a day in the life, or what does it feel like to be Mike today, in a day like today, or, last week, whatever you want to go for?
Yeah, so usually it starts off with a royal battle, like a battle royal, I should say a battle royal with my children first thing in the morning to get them to school. And then I'm surrounded by geniuses all day long working on this incredible product that we're making, where we talk about how to create experiences that never existed before. So that is my day every day, right?
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Working with a bunch of geniuses around you who are doing all those amazing things for Snorble and other products, I'm sure.
Well, primarily Snorble right now. That's my main focus. But I do have some interesting insights on how we got to Snorble. And it does lie heavy in game mechanics. So when we do get into that part of the conversation, I can kind of take you
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. And because we're all about stories and knowing experiences, because that's where we learn. As humans, I would argue it's one of the things we learn the most at that circumstance. So would you please tell us one of those stories where, you would like to call this maybe your favorite fail or first attempt in learning? One of those times when you were going north and things went south, creating games, creating Snorble, something along those lines. We want to be there with you and experience that and learn from that experience.
Okay. So about 7 years ago, I started doing some soul searching. And essentially what had come out of that soul searching was that we decided to focus on defining the human interaction experience for robotics. And my viewpoint of that is different. You see, where a lot of people are focused on the specifics of what the robots will do, I was really focused on how we would communicate with the machines. And, we really started thinking about the human interaction layer. And a part of that, and I should say the center point of that, was around story, character, and also multi-user experiences, either around gamification. But imagine instead of it being that the game would just react with your joystick or react with your mouse or whatever you're doing, or your touchscreens or whatever, it's actually reacting with you physically, right? So character comes to life. And as that character comes to life, it not only has its own game state, in terms of its own emotional context, it also knows your emotional context. And because of your emotional context and the other people within the room all engaging within a game narrative, we basically started doing all these crazy tests around how a character could exist in a real world scenario in a gamified routine. And I spent so much time working on that. And truthfully, it started to engulf me. Like I went from being like, oh, this is cool, to being like, I don't want to do anything else. This is the only thing I want to do. And, I invested heavily and put all my eggs in that basket. And, I went out to pasture to try to raise money. So this is where the failure comes in. The game platform that we had was called Legend Bots. And our first go-to-market game concept was called The Chancellor of the Universe, where essentially it was kind of like a spoof on Spaceballs. I don't know if you remember that movie, Spaceballs. Were you a fan of Spaceballs?
No, I don't remember it.
Oh my God, it's so good. It's a Mel Brooks movie. It's essentially like a spoof on Star Wars, and John Candy and Rick Moranis. And Rick Moranis played this character called Dark Helmet, and the Chancellor of the Universe was kind of a spoof. It was an homage to Dark Helmet, which was this Darth Vader-like character, but had like almost like a self-esteem complex. It was this really brilliant character that was so complex and rich and just hilarious. And essentially, we wanted to bring that character to life and have not just you interact with it, but you and all your friends interact with it into a multiplayer type gaming experience where we leverage augmented reality, a physical game narrative, a robot that could recognize your emotional context, could address you physically in this kind of crazy system that we set up, right? So it sounds cool. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Went out to raise money, right? And could not raise money. Unfortunately, there was a series of companies that were that had come out in the social robotics space and had raised a lot of money and had all, for whatever ridiculous reason, not succeeded and had to fold, right? And it was really hard, because I went out and I was like, I don't understand. This is a win. Everyone that sees it's like, I can't wait to get this, And we couldn't raise the money. And then I had an advisor, brilliant man. He was a former VC, chairman of a venture capital group. And he just took a liking to me, thankfully. And he sat me down and he said, Mike, you're brilliant, but you're stupid. Right? Which was not the nicest way to start the conversation. I'm just saying, not the nicest way to, but what he shared with me was, he said, the number of VCs out there that invest in robotics is, this much, like 20% of the market or 15% of the market. The number of VCs that invest in robotics and gaming now drops to 1% of all the venture capitalists and all the investors in the world. The number of investors that invest in gaming, robotics, and consumer products is zero. And I was like, what? And imagine, right? I spent years focusing in on how to make this incredible experience for people. And I could show you videos that would blow your mind. We were doing things before it was, we were creating pathways to multiplayer engagement in AR with a physical robot in 2015. That was before any of those SDKs were even available, right, in order to make multi-user AR. We were doing that back then, right? And, here it was. I put all my eggs in that basket because I fell in love. And, passion is a very powerful thing. And truthfully, I was unsuccessful. I couldn't raise the money and I had to take a step back. And essentially, Snorble is the result of recalibrating. And
I mean, again, I know you sort of, you could also almost call it a pivot into Snorble. But before going into that pivot, if you were at that time that you were at that point, is there something that you would do differently? Like, I'm not talking which game mechanic you would change. I'm maybe talking about how do you approach it differently? Maybe understand your audience, or maybe it's even just the investors.
Yeah, what I would have done differently was I would have basically presented it differently to a lot of the other investors. And I wouldn't have talked about the game per se, because games, if you think about it from an investment perspective, and I'm sure that a lot of people listening probably have had this issue. Typically, the investors in games are looking for a track record, a history of success, right? Or they're looking for, something that they believe will be a hit. And otherwise, they don't. It's not as common for them to invest unless there is a direct path to distribution or those types of things, right? They need to see a clear path to reduce the risk.
Well, there's huge players in the market with huge huge balls of money for sure.
Yeah, but it's a small pool. It really is. If you think of the folks that actually invest in games themselves, it is a smaller pool. It's not. Yep. if you're talking about like the next B2B SaaS model product, that's everybody. It's like, oh, we invest in this. Of course you do. Everybody invests in this. You don't, like this is like, it's like a no-brainer. It's like, oh, I put in $1, I get back $3, so it becomes a lot easier for them to qualify it. But with games, there's magic, right? Because when you're telling stories, it's how great you can tell those stories and how much we fall in love with those characters, right? And then, of course, the game mechanics and all those other things. But it really comes down to and those are not quantifiable. You can't put a pin in it, right? Like, oh, this person's telling the story the right way. There's no, so it's harder. It's harder for people in finance and harder for certain investors to be able to see that unless they have a history or a track record in being able to pick those winners, right?
Yeah.
So if I had to choose, make another swing at that bat, I would probably take a step back and look at a way that I could take one of the brilliant technological advancements that we had and focus in on that as a first point of investment, right? Because that becomes much easier to digest. And then through my own capital, make my first prototypes for my first games to our audiences, right? That's
makes
kind of
sense.
how I would, you got to shift it up. So go instead of telling someone something that they can't relate to, focus on the thing that they can relate to, and that's also a way. I mean, I know that that's a great way to kind of pull from what we do in games anyways, right? Just take that kind of idea and then apply it.
And the thing is, like literally today, I was in a workshop I'm delivering with the EFMD, and one of the things I always like to stress very much, because I know it's really hard, is that when you create something, those first prototypes, if you go to your basement and spend 5 years creating it, you're going to be so in love with that prototype, it's going to be hard to get feedback on. So get something out there as soon as you can, small, simple, a part of the technology, something that you can show to somebody else and see if it gets any traction. And that's going to be helpful as well if you're going to get investment. You're going to see you have some proof of concept, you have some other things. And if you can do it in parts, even better. I mean, in your case, you were developing, cutting edge technology as well and new ways to interact between people, their toys, their games. So maybe taking it one step at a time would have been a good move at that point, at least. Yeah.
It's a problem when you can see something. And I think that we all, like many of us entrepreneurs, all fall into the same thing. It's like, I can see it. And typically people are like, yeah, but you're trying to eat the whole pie, or, I'm like, well, I like eating the whole pie. If I had my choice in eating a slice or a whole pie, I'm going to eat the damn whole pie. So either you're going to share with me in the damn pie, or you're not going to get a slice of pie. I don't know where this is going, but I do think that, it is an entrepreneurial issue, and because if you can see it, it's hard to just try to take that first step instead of trying to take many steps.
But it's something that we do learn from game designers for sure.
Yeah.
So there you go. That would be a key lesson, and it sounds fantastic. I think taking that experience from you and, having, again, failed or a first attempt in learning, I think is key for many of your future successes as well, and the successes of other people who might be listening to this story and taking that shift. Like we talked about a fail moment or a first attempt in learning. How about now we talk about a success? I mean, a path that took you, whether it was from that same path you started with or something else. We want to be there and live that success with you. And of course, see, maybe one or two things you would attribute part of that success to.
Yes. So one of the things that I learned from the previous failure, and I've made a few missteps. I'm not going to say I've actually made a lot of missteps, I think. But one thing I always try to do is to reflect, right? So, after my advisor had given me that kind of rude awakening, I went back and I licked my wounds and I kind of puttered around the house like everyone does, right? And my son was around, I guess he would have been around 3 years old at the time. And me and my son have a very wonderful bond. He loves his dad. Like he's hooked to me he's basically attached to my hip. My wife had to take him out of the house so I could talk to you, like that type of thing, right? So what happens at night is he's like this super sweetheart, awesome kid all day long. But then at around 7:30, when he knows we're going to put him down, he just turns into a maniac. Like it's a full on battle royal, and I'm talking of epic proportions, right? It's like the worlds have collided at bedtime, right? And we finally get him down, and then throughout the night, he basically shows up in our room 5 or 6 times. I keep walking him back to his room, right? And then sitting with him until he falls asleep, and then getting out of his bed and coming to our bed, and then doing this over and over again. I finally got him down around 4 o'clock in the morning in his bed. And then I was wide awake, because I was like, damn it, he did it to me again. It's like, I basically didn't sleep since he was born for the first 5. Like, he's 5 now. It's been about 5 years that I hadn't slept. Now he's finally starting to sleep in his room, thankfully. But for the most part, it was just an ongoing battle, right? And here's the other thing that's terrible. He could go to bed at midnight, like for traveling or whatever, and he's up late because we're on planes or whatever. Go to bed at midnight, but he still wake up at 6 a.m., like clockwork. 5:30, 6 a.m., boom, up. And he's like, hi, Daddy, I'm awake. I'm like,
I'm here. I'm
like, oh my God, please stop. And that's literally the feeling. And that night at around 4 o'clock in the morning, I was like, I can't take it. I was like, I got to get this kid to stay in his room and go to sleep, right? So I look up how to get a toddler to sleep, and there are hundreds of millions of search results. And then I went, huh. And then I started looking at the solutions that were available. And I was like, there's nothing that actually speaks to the most important person in this story, which is my son. And that's how we started, actually. We started to look at, how do we engage children in a way that they fall in love, that they feel the magic? And essentially, Snorble is the culmination of those ideas. It's like we create this magical experience that inspires them. And through those magical experiences, we basically introduce them into things that will better their lives, routines and habits that will better their entire lives. Everything from yoga to meditation to developmental habits, like how we learn, how we imagine, storytelling. All those things happen during the day. And then at nighttime, we gamify the entire sleep routine, and we reward and celebrate them at every moment. And that is the magic of Snorble.
And is there, like, again, you've gone through the story beautifully. I love the way you sort of framed it and how it, the idea came through. But is there anything that you would like to sort of highlight? Like, I think these are some of the things that we did right to be able to achieve this. Maybe, here you can also get into specific, mechanics. Here you can get into specific things that your product does. I don't know. Like, we want to be there a little bit further and understand what went well this time.
Yes. So what went well that's different? So one of the things that we did with Snorble from the previous round was we really honed in on the needs and the perspective of the child, right? And I think that, because the other game was more about older kids and more about, but this became less about the game and more about the collective experience where, instead of it being just something you would interact with at bedtime or would take you through your teeth brushing game or those types of things, what it would do is it would become a companion and someone that you would fall in love with. And that connection to the character, makes the success of all the other activities so much better. So things like a basic thing, and we did this on the previous product, but a basic thing that's actually really, really hitting home is you meet Snorble. And when you meet Snorble, Snorble essentially introduces itself to you, right? And it knows you by name, and it will call you by name. But it doesn't only know you, it knows all the members of the family. And the experiences aren't just tied to you. Like, one of the differences, and I'm sure that you feel this too, like the difference between a multi-dynamic immersive experience within a room versus a solo experience in a game is very different. Right? When you are by yourself in even if you're wearing a VR headset or if you're in something that is completely immersive, you're in it usually by yourself unless there are multiple people that exist in other locations typically playing with you, right?
Yeah.
Typically. This is different. This is about the child not looking at a screen and not looking down, but experiencing these activities and these games in the world with the family, right? And the power of that's really special, I think. It's kind of like bringing back the board game kind of concept, but it's realized.
Absolutely. I know you mentioned it's not looking at the screen, but it did somehow remind me a little bit of when I was a kid. One of the things I loved, of course, were video games. And one of the things I really enjoyed, like the best times with video games, was when I could find somebody else who could. I always had at least two controllers for any console I had. Well, Nintendo and Super Nintendo were maximum two anyways. But I really enjoyed the fact of having somebody else right there. Like the experience of, you were playing, I don't know, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was one that I really loved and enjoyed a lot. Like screaming around and bashing on the enemies or whatever it was that we were doing. It was really, really enjoyable. And for me, I'm thinking that that's kind of linked and connected to actually having another human being right there, like physically with you. Even though we were kind of interacting through or with the screen, it was also all about that social interaction with another person, which, again, the Snorble seems to be precisely that thing where you are interacting not only with the device, but the device is interacting with all of you, and it's involving that social experience. So I really, really like that one.
I got more. one of the other things that we're doing, I just because I was trying to think of, like what would be another distinct success between the previous approach and this approach, and one of the biggest successes is actually Snorble itself interacts with other machines. So what that means is the story does not lie directly with Snorble. It lies with the entire infrastructure of storytelling that Snorble supports. So imagine, you talk to Snorble and Snorble realizes that there are other characters from the Snorble characterverse that exist within your physical space, and the experience can change based off of that.
So it's having that social experience, even when social doesn't make as much sense as in the traditional sense. In the future, I'm sure this will be happening more and more, but you're, in that sense, sort of moving forward and trying to be cutting edge in that sense. And it seems Snorble has been a success, at least this time. I'm sure you learned from the previous experiences. And you've described two of these experiences you've been through. I'm sure you've had many more. So I'm guessing that at this point, when creating a new product, especially when it has, as you were saying, some sort of gamification, some game mechanics, or some game that you're creating, I'm guessing that at this point you have some sort of process, some sort of way of doing things. Can you briefly, of course, describe what does that look like? We would like to share some of that.
Yeah, so first off, it actually revolves around culture. And what we try to do at Snorble is every single person on the Snorble team has a voice. And through that, through them realizing that they have a voice and that they're encouraged to speak up, we're able to get perspective, not just from a single view, but from a multidisciplinary view. And through creating a multidisciplinary team where everyone has different backgrounds and different experiences and a different understanding of how things can work, and then empowering them with the ability to speak and to be part of the collective growth of the company, it allows us to see things in a different way. So that at a core is fundamental to how our company is set up to be more successful. The second thing that we do is essentially we have a focus on creative where we do things collaboratively, and we leverage a process where we use creative roundtables where it's like open discussions. Everyone has a voice. There are no wrong answers. And then through that, some decisions can be made. So through that explanation, we make some decisions and then we just run. So that's part of it. The other part of it is actually bringing in people. When I say geniuses, I mean it. Like our team is it's bonkers. So you have these brilliant people that are all very passionate and have an incredible background, incredible expertise, but without ego. And I work tirelessly at making sure that everyone is being a good cast member in the company in order to progress the vision for the product, right?
Yeah. Makes sense.
So I think that those are key. In terms of our process for ideation and creative, it's rapid fire. Like we have such a high capacity for creative across the entire team. Even the CFO is brilliantly creative. It's ridiculous. So when everybody's on call, just the ideas keep coming, and we just pick the winners. One of our situations with Snorble that I think is, something we got to watch out for is that there's so much good that's being created, so many good ideas, so many good concepts that really one of our biggest challenges because of that is focus. So, so it's like, okay, like, God, okay, one of our team members just a few days ago actually produced something that I didn't even know they were working on, right? Which is that's not a good thing for a CEO to say. I'm just saying, no one's listening to that, but hopefully, shh, no. But, but seriously though, like, he went off and he's like, we're waiting on this thing. I don't want to wait anymore. I'm just going to go make it. And he showed up 2 weeks later, right? Essentially to the meeting. He's like, listen, I need some room here to go do some stuff. And he was, doing some of the other production work that he had going, but he was basically creating this thing in the background and did a skunk works and showed up to the meeting with something that I was like, oh, wow, that's a brand new area of IP that we're going to leverage in this new product. Right.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. How many times can someone say that in their career, where when you go to the meetings, you're excited to talk to the people that you're working with?
Exciting. That's interesting. And it's, as you were saying at the start, it's part of the culture that you're creating within the company. And it's a central role for that chief executive officer.
Yes.
Definitely funny. Creating that culture and not enforcing it. Enforcing is not a nice word, but, making sure it sticks. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I even when I say that, I don't know if did I say enforcing. I probably did say enforcing, but it's true.
No, I did.
Oh, you did. Okay, good. I might have said it, but it's true. It's really important, and because we're all human beings. That's the other thing. I think that's another thing that people forget. Processes are great, and I'm a big fan. Like we have, you should see our product roadmap and like all the stuff that everything that we've done in terms of setup is top notch, top tier, pro. Right? But the most important thing that people have to realize is that process is only about fulfilling an outcome, right? And further, It has to involve people. And people are the most complex part of any process. So great leaders really understand how to get people to be their best. And that's really something that I'm really blessed with, because I have a lot of leaders in my organization and they're all pulling out the best out of each other. So that's something I think that is a superpower for the company right now.
One of the keys to success.
Just a quick break before we continue. Are you enjoying this podcast? If you're listening through a podcasting app, please subscribe and rate us on the app. This will be of great help to reach more engagers so we can change the world together through gamification.
And Mike, what would you say is, after your experience, what would you say is some sort of best practice? Something that you would say, any gamified project would probably benefit from having?
Okay. I think that the creative roundtable is so critical to the process of ideation, where everyone comes together, you have a voice, you map things out together. No one knows better than anybody else. It's the best idea wins. I think and we've all talked about that. But I think that one of the things that is also really important is reflection. Like when you're doing something, if it's working great. If it's not, you have to know when to pull the plug, right? And that's about features. That's about, big ideas. That's about environments. It could be about anything. Right? But this is the reflection part is something that people have a challenge with, because as you know, if it's your idea, it's much harder to get rid of for a lot of folks. Right?
Yeah.
So
you fall in love with it.
You fall in love with it. Right. The other thing I would say to you too is don't be afraid to explore the basis of it. Like it's okay to have failure, and failure is a key to success. I've been part of 2 global transformations in tech before I was 30. And I led teams to do some pretty big things when I was younger. The thing about that, the thing that I learned about that is it's about successfully making mistakes. And if you can do that and really be okay with, we took a misstep here, we can fix that, right? How do we fix it? Instead of beating yourself up over it, which is something that we've all done, right? That becomes a key towards really advancing the innovations that you were creating.
Makes sense. Great recommendation for sure. And keeping that spree of recommendations, what would you say is somebody that maybe comes to your mind when you hear these questions? Is there somebody that maybe inspires you, maybe you've heard about, that you would say, this person, I would definitely like to hear them answering these questions as well in Professor Game?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of folks that I'll come up with a few if that's okay.
Sure.
A friend, John Sir Platten, is one I would definitely say. He's the creative director and also a game designer. Originally, he was part of Niantic and came up with Pokemon Go's game design and Ingress, right?
Nice.
Brilliant. He's also a game professor like yourself at the New York Film Academy, and he's a friend and just brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. So I would love to hear his commentary on some of this stuff. John Snoddy, who I'm also familiar with, he's the SVP of the Disney Imagineers. I think he would be a wonderful person to interview. We don't hang out on the weekends, although I do admire him greatly. I think he'd be wonderful. And then the other one I would say is Bushnell, Nolan, right? Which I'm sure you might have talked to him already, but he's the founder for Atari, and I think he would be a wonderful person to have on the podcast.
Pretty exciting characters for sure. We'll see how many of those we can have in the future on the podcast. And to continue this recommendations sort of section, is there a book that you recommend the engagers? If you were to say choose one book, what book would that be and why?
Yeah, there's two, if I can make two recommendations. Sorry. And I think you'll like this one. Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. Have you read that?
No, I haven't. I've heard about it before, but you remind me that I should be purchasing it soon.
Yeah, it's the story. It's the stories around behind how video games are made, and there's all kinds of like perspectives and stuff, which is really, really cool. And then the other one that maybe you have read is Game Over: How Nintendo Conquered the World.
No, I haven't heard. I hadn't heard about that one either.
Yeah, I think just because you mentioned Nintendo, so I thought that would be a good one to follow up with you. That would be super fun. And
part of my villain origin story has to do with the Nintendo magazine. So I was a complete fan of that, but I haven't read too many books on Nintendo specifically.
Oh, very cool. Well, I think you'd enjoy it. I think you'd really enjoy it. I love all the stories, and I love all those old stories. So really cool.
Absolutely. Story lover, storytelling, fan, absolute fan. And I've seen how it works marvels when doing games and gamification. So absolutely, for sure. And what would you say is, that sweet spot, that thing that you do better, at least than most other people, that sort of distinguishes you? What would be your sort of superpower?
Oh, God.
It's not a humble moment for this one.
No, it's not. I just No, I will. I can tell you what the guys say about me, if that's cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So what we have a saying at Snorble, which is we can create magic. And the team started saying it back to me. And the reason why I think that that's my superpower is that I have an ability to inspire people to dream and to explore the realization of those dreams. That's something that I've been able to do, which I didn't realize was something that I was able to really do until this last probably 5 years. Just getting people to step out of their comfort zone and do things that they didn't know that they could do. So I'd say that's probably my superpower.
Absolute superpower, especially for a person who's leading a company. You need to be able to inspire others into action and to creating fantastic things that can be even magical. And tell me about magic and those amazing moments. What would you say is one of those games that have created the most magic moments, or your favorite game? Which would that be?
So I have two from I keep saying two. It's like everything is in doubles. I don't know why that is.
Best things come in twos.
You're gonna laugh, but I spent so much time in the arcade when I was a kid. Like, I loved video games when I was a kid, and we had an original Atari. We had a ColecoVision originally. We had a ColecoVision, then an Atari. I never got Nintendo. I used to go to my friend's house to play Nintendo every day, right? And that's kind of how I started. But the arcade was a big thing for me. And one of my favorite aspects of the arcade was or my favorite two games was one, the original WrestleMania. Loved that game. I was a huge WWF fan when I was a kid.
I think I played that one in Super Nintendo. I might be wrong.
Oh, you definitely did. It was awesome, and it was there. I think it was also in the original Nintendo, but I could be wrong with that. But I loved that game, and I also loved the original Star Wars arcade game. I loved that game. They must have sucked thousands of dollars worth of quarters out of me for that game. And I used to like, if anyone was in the game when I get there, I would just wait for them to get out so I could put my stack of quarters on them. Just be like, pop, pop, pop. But those two for me, like even now, because it's funny because that original Star Wars arcade game has now been upped and there's like the new versions. When I go into Dave & Buster's or any of the new adult arcade type things with my kids, the kids will start running around and we'll start playing games. And then immediately, if I get into that game, it's almost like my wife has to come pull me back out. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm in this game again, right? But
yeah,
if it's the story.
I know the feeling for sure. I 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I'm not sure now, we were in Orlando and we happened to stay at a hotel that was next to one of these bars that, you pay sort of an entrance and you could play all the arcade games for free.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The what is it? I don't know what they're called, but they're like adult bars. You know what I mean? Where it's like, yeah, like I love them. Absolutely love them.
You brought me down memory lane today. I mean, with WrestleMania, I remember that if that was the one that I played, I rented it at Blockbuster.
Oh yeah, oh my God, Blockbuster! Seriously, we kept that place open for years, for years and years and years.
I'm sure. And with the arcade games, like I've been thinking for a while, like I really enjoyed arcades. I've been thinking for a while, it's a question of space in our small apartment here in Madrid, having an arcade, like a physical arcade. And now, they produce them same size, with the joystick and the buttons, but you have like 10,000 different games you can play there. And of course, you don't have to pay the quarters now because it's in your house. So I really think I'm going to have to buy myself into this idea further down the lane. But I'll have to find the time to play it as well.
Well, Rob, we just bought a house and I literally said to my wife, I need to get like a full arcade size level game console, right?
Yeah.
And she was like, you're crazy. I was like, yes, I am. And this is what we're doing.
Fantastic. I completely support you on that one. Problem will be, getting out of that to work and to be with the kids and to do other adult stuff.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
that'll be the only problem. So, Mike, it's been a complete blast having you in the podcast. I'm afraid we're running a bit out of time. So before we take off, is there any sort of final piece of advice you want to leave the engagers with? Any call to action, anywhere we can find you as well on the internet? Just this is sort of that final shining moment.
So a couple things. Again, two things. I would say, I don't know what's wrong with me. It's always two things. First things first is that I am available to anyone that wants to reach out to me. Just feel free to reach out to me on the typical channels. I'm available on Instagram or LinkedIn or all that type of stuff. And if you have questions or you're looking for guidance, I'm totally here for anyone that needs me. The second thing I would say from an advice perspective is just don't be afraid of failure. It's okay to make mistakes. And, some failures are big and they have a little stink to them. Some failures are small and you can kind of get through them quicker. But either way, this is part of our own journey, right? It's part of our own simulation that we're all living right now.
For sure.
So it's okay to make mistakes. And, I beat myself pretty badly up on the last one. And, I came out of it. I've never been stronger or felt as good. So that would be my one piece of advice.
Sounds like very sound and good advice for the engagers, for this beautiful crowd that we have today with us. And where can we find more about you and about Snorble?
If you go to Snorble, www.snorble.com, and Snorble is spelled SNORBLE, Snorble.com. You can find more about us there. And, and if you want to experience the wonderful land of Lullaboo, which Snorble comes from, we have an incredible backstory and all this wonderful stuff that's being released throughout all our social channels. And we're looking forward to sharing that journey with everyone else when Snorble gets released.
Sounds absolutely great. And thank you very much, Mike, for sharing these times with us. However, at least for now and for today, as you know, it is time to say that it's game over. Hey, Engagers, thank you for listening to the Professor Game podcast. And if you want more interviews with incredible guests like Mike, please go to professorgame.com/subscribe and get started on our email list for free. That way we can be in contact and you'll be the first to know of any opportunities that Professor Game
might have for you. And before you go on to your next mission, remember to subscribe or follow using your favorite podcast app. This is completely for free, so that you will receive the next episode directly to you from Professor Game. See you there.